We're going to take a look at the mentor meeting notes. These are completed by trainees, with part B taking place before the meeting and part A being completed during the meeting. So let's go to part B first, because this is what trainees will complete before the meeting. Part B is made up of assessment of children's learning in the class, a brief summary addressing mostly the core areas, and then an evaluation of their own learning across the course of the week. So let's take a look at the evaluation of children's progress. Trainees need to develop their ability to take on board a range of assessment input, whether that's working books, children's feedback, observation, etc. And they need to do that and have a good sense, or an increasingly good sense, of where children are at, regardless or not of whether they've been directly teaching them. That is the skill of the class teacher, isn't it? To be able to have a good sense of where the class is at any point in time, regardless or not of whether you've been lead teaching. So, trainees are tasked with reviewing literacy, maths and one other curriculum area each week, just looking at the class overall. The examples completed here in pink give you an idea of the expectations of SCITT in terms of the brevity, the succinctness and so on. When we're talking about what went well in literacy for the week, we're not repeating what the learning objective is, we're not describing the activities, those things are located elsewhere. We are just reporting on the overall attainment of the children in relation to the learning objective. What could all children do? What could most children do? What could some children do if they weren't all achieving the learning objective? That should give us a good sense of what trainees are perceiving, and it will inform the conversation about children's learning in the mentor meeting and enable mentors to redirect trainees if perhaps their view of children's accomplishments is not quite accurate. And in autumn term, of course, that's often going to be the case until trainees are more secure in all of these things. The even better if is to help trainees practice the skill of identifying children who perhaps did not meet the learning objectives and starting to recognise what might assist those children in future learning. So this isn't about critiquing what wasn't possible or which approaches hadn't happened this week. It's about recognising that with my knowledge that some children were able to do this but did not meet the learning objective fully, what could those children be doing next week that will improve their outcomes? Now again, trainees may not have all the answers to those questions, and it's perfectly appropriate for them to make a note and say, ask mentor, or perhaps put a suggestion. This is just their initial thought about what could help those children to be successful in the week ahead. Again, regardless or not of whether they're working with those children. Almost imagining perhaps that these notes are going to facilitate another adult to work with those children in the future. What we can see next is a section on subject and curriculum, going through the exercise of assessing children's outcomes against the learning objectives may well reveal that trainees have some gaps in their own subject knowledge. So, for example, if trainees have assessed that shape task that we've got notes on here, they may, during that week, have realised there's some gaps in their understanding of some subject-specific terminology. They only need to make a brief note here if that is the case, but that should inform their non-teaching time in the week ahead, and they should be deliberately acting upon those points that they've raised themselves. When we then look at the rest of Part B, it's still continuing to address the trainees' progress and needs. Again, we want the trainee to come to the mentor meeting fully prepared and ready to self-identify where their strengths and areas for development are, and not always be waiting for the mentor to lead them in those things. Again, they may pitch these things very accurately, or they may misconstrue where they're at, and that in itself will be informative for mentors. So they're making notes first on just general pedagogy. We can see here in this example, these are brief points. They have been linked to areas of the SCIT curriculum, behaviour for learning, research-informed practice, values well-being, because in this imaginary example, those were the areas that were particularly relevant for that trainee that week. We can then see they've made a specific note about their 3 targets from the week before and the extent to which they feel they've been met and any areas in which they might need further support. Again, we expect trainees to be proactive, not coming to the session as an empty vessel, but coming with a kind of increasingly accurate view of their training needs and ideas about how they can self-direct their learning in particular areas where that's possible. So that's the prep that the trainees need to do before they come to the mentor meeting. Let's scroll back to part A. What we can see here is a sequence of prompts to just talk about the strategic issues of being a mentor and trainee partnership. Have things from the last week been completed? Have deadlines been met? And so on. The prompts are very clear, and we have drop-down boxes to select in agreement through conversation the extent to which the trainee has accomplished those things. The prompt at the top here is really important. Trainees should be bringing these items to the meeting and having them available on their laptops or on the school's PC, so that whilst you're meeting you can dip in and out of the relevant documents and update those at the same time. The conversation in a mentor meeting will generate new targets. Those need to be logged. Conversations about scheduling for the week ahead will inform timetables, so the timetables should be updated. So that is all pretty straightforward. The prompts are very clear. One thing I want to draw attention to is this weekly reflection focus. In the placement planner, with the exception of week 1 and typically the final week of each placement, there is a weekly reflective conversation that needs to happen as part of the mentor meeting around something like growth mindset, for example, or specific praise. Trainees are required to succinctly make an account of the conversation held, and it should be useful to them and their learning. And it should make a note where, for example, they might have any particular training needs. It might even be that they make notes of resources that you've signposted them to, and so on. But these are succinct notes. They're not super detailed. They should be entirely manageable to take within the context of your meeting. And finally, the last step of that part A is for the mentor to draw attention to one specific highlight of the trainee's practice from that week. And whilst the mentor isn't logging these notes themselves, they should be having that discussion, wrapping up the meeting on that positive note, and enabling the trainee to make the appropriate notes from that feedback. We asked mentors to review what has been recorded and sign it off as an accurate record. This gives mentors the opportunity to note to the trainee where perhaps there have been any misunderstandings, and to get the trainee to edit it and put it right if that's the case. For example, if in the section up here they've logged all met, and the mentor might say, well, actually no, I think we recognise that some of these things haven't been met, let's switch that around please. It just means that we know that when we come away from that meeting, we're all on exactly the same page, everything is accurate, and the targets on the professional target log accurately reflect what's expected of the trainee going forward. So that's a little summary of the mentor meeting notes. Please drop me a note if you have any questions.